Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Such a great idea, right? Or a great vision. I am myself. It's really what we're here about today as we celebrate today our burning bowl ceremony. We get to participate in a ritual. We don't do a lot of ritual in Unity, but this Sunday and next Sunday with our White Stone are very ritual oriented. Why ritual? You know, for some of us who were raised maybe in more traditional religions, we sort of flinch a little bit with ritual. But ritual actually can really serve us on our spiritual journey because we're doing something material, something that we can actually touch and feel that's symbolic of what is happening in our spiritual life. Today, that's about not only release, but setting an intention. The burning bowl ceremony has two parts, at least the way that we celebrate it. One, we will at some point light the burning bowl, which here in the sanctuary, we have our traditional burning bowl, but now that we're doing this service virtually, you will have your own way of burning that which you're ready to let go of. So we invite you to take any piece of paper and begin to write, as the service progresses, things that are no longer serving you, things that are in the way of you being the fullness of the Spirit that you are, living the fullness of life, inviting in the goodness of life, the abundance of life. Just start jotting them down. Don't have to be written in any kind of format. You can write as much or as little as you like. Here in the service, when the burning bowl is lit, we'll be using a little piece of flash paper to burn. You may want to burn yours in your fireplace, or maybe outside you have a fire pit, or you could take a metal bowl and burn yours outside. You want to be safe in your burning of the items that you're ready to release. But if possible, burn them. We also want to offer you another option this year, which is if you want to type in what it is that you are ready to release into an email to us, send it to Rachel at ColumbineUnity.org. We promise that we will not read the email. Put up in the subject line, burning bowl. That'll be our cue to open your email and print it. And we'll burn it during our next service, where we'll have a fire pit here at the church and where we'll be holding an intention of release. So if you'd like to be part of that energy, just jot off an email to us. We have our staff person, Carol, sitting at the computer ready to print those out for our 12:30 service. And then the second part of this service is that you get to take some time to write a letter to yourself, a letter that if you give it to us, we will mail back out to you around Thanksgiving time, a letter that sets the intention. Intention is important in our lives. It brings us into a focus. You know, life is hitting us with so many different things. But if we can stay focused on what it is we want, and especially if we can write it down, right? Because we have to have a certain clarity about it to be able to write about it. And even if you're not feeling all that clear, every time you're willing to focus on it and bring it into greater clarity, you have the opportunity, or maybe that's not quite the right wording, you are supporting the very universe that we live in bringing forth that which is your heart's desire, that which you feel guided to bring forth into this worldly experience that we are having. If you picked up a packet from us, you'll then put that letter in the slightly smaller envelope and address it to yourself. And then you'll put the self-addressed envelope in the larger envelope and send that to us at Columbine Spiritual Center, 8900 Arapahoe Road, Boulder, Colorado, 80303. Or you can drop your letter off at the church. But here's something that I think is true to human form. If you don't do it today, If you don't do it during this service, chances are you're not going to do it. And then you're going to miss out on receiving this wonderful reminder that we get later in the year. A reminder of where we were, a reminder of what we were thinking about, what we were hoping for in our lives at that time. And I encourage you to think big. This last year, when I received it at Thanksgiving, I had written, "Hope you're enjoying your cabin in Grand Lake, that it makes your soul happy. You deserve a life that supports and nourishes you." So, this isn't the first time I've written about Grand Lake, but this year, towards the end of the summer, Stuart and I took possession of our new house in Grand Lake. Yes, I'd probably been writing a statement similar to that for the last 3 years. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Even, it's so interesting that, in thinking about our letter, we can say, well, is that really going to happen? Do I dare put that in my letter? Put it in your letter. What the heck, right? I mean, sometimes we're not quite ready to receive that which we hope for, but we can still set the intention. And there's nothing wrong with what we put in our letter not manifesting. It's all part of the life process. But it's time. It's time for us to engage in that process, to be the light that we're invited to be. If you have any questions about the instructions that I've given you, type them into the chat. There are plenty of people involved in our community who have been through this process many a times, and your questions will get answered. Sue and I, every year, like to then spend a few minutes guiding you through ideas of areas that you might have not thought about in releasing. And typically, we spend a lot of time on the mind, thoughts, and beliefs, and that patterned way of living that comes from those deep-seated beliefs. But this year, I wanted to take us in a bit of a different direction and to look at our heart. For you see, the heart is also an area that greatly influences us. And the heart and the way we hold things in our heart can impact our openness to life, our openness to receiving, our openness to being engaged with the unfolding that often is mysterious and leading us to untold goodness, untold opportunities of how to see how magnificent we are, to experience firsthand how magnificent we are as spiritual beings. The Bible, I think, Jesus might have been talking about the significance of the heart when in the Beatitudes, which are found in the book of Matthew, he wrote, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This passage used to confuse me. I was thinking of spirit as our nature, right? As that individualized expression of God that is us. Until someone pointed out to me that in this passage, spirit is not capitalized. And thus, as I was reading the commentaries this week, they all pointed to the fact that this is that a sense of excitement, that sense of passion, that aliveness within us. It is a natural human experience, and it is attributed to our heart. That where we feel love, where we feel passion, excitement, those are all qualities of the heart. And so several of the narratives that I read on this spoke to the fact of how important it is to have a sense of emptiness or a sense of space in our heart so that we can be open to the invitations of our nature, the invitations of spirit, the invitations of the universe, if you will. You see, each of us as human beings have a tremendous quality to love, a capacity to love. But as human beings, we tend to think that the things we love are what invoke love in us. And so we want to collect them. So we don't get that love is actually a quality of our nature. It arises when something touches us. It arises when something speaks to our soul. And while that thing can be the trigger, love just flows as us. But because we tend to attribute the experience of love to people, to things, then we gather them in. And the spiritual heart is not really a physical thing, but if you thought of it as a container or a chamber, we're literally filling that chamber up with things that we want to hold on to. And we can put a lot of energy into holding on to them. Sometimes we hold them just a little too close. Maybe you were one of those kids that was held too close, and then rebellion comes up, and we want to break out to be that individualized expression that we are. And so we not only exert a lot of energy, we can also cause others to suffer, and we certainly suffer if we lose one of those things that we hold so dear, whether it's a person or a thing. The Bible actually speaks to this when it says that the things of the earth die, rust, and decay, but the things of spirit live on. And so the love that we are is intended to flow. Doesn't mean that we can't love things, doesn't mean we can't possess and own things that we want, but we have to be careful not to hold them so tightly that there's no room to love something new and to move in that direction. I was in a retreat about a month ago where the presenter mentioned the Kaaba. Now, I'd never heard about the Kaaba, but the Kaaba is a place in Mecca where people who practice Islam make pilgrimages to. So it's a sacred place. And the design of it is that now there is a cube-shaped building in the middle of this large arena sort of area. But back in the time of Muhammad, the founder of Islam, there were 350 different statues of gods around this central place of worship. And Muhammad was a big believer that there's really only one God. And so he had that area clear. The story is that he called upon that one God, and then he faced each one of the statues, and on their own, they either fell over backwards or fell on their face. But the point is that all those other gods were removed. And so in Islam, when you go to Kaaba, it is symbolic of the human heart being cleansed of all the idols that it tends to worship, all those things that it puts before the activity of spirit within us. And so in that cleansing, then, we're able to continue to say yes to life, to be open to life. In the Old Testament, there's also a mention of idols. In the book of Exodus, the Israelites had left Egypt to come back to the Promised Land. And they'd been on their journey for a long time at this point. And God kind of summons Moses up to have a little chat with him up on the mountainside. And he's gone for, a number of days. And the people become very concerned. They're not really connected to the fact that they are expressions of God yet. They're looking for someone outside of them to be that God. And so with Moses gone, their fear comes up, and they take all of their gold and they make it into a golden calf. They want to have something that is symbolic of the prosperity that's coming, something that will guide them, so they create this thing to worship, right? This thing to love, this thing to hold on to, this outer thing. Well, God sees what's happening. God in the Old Testament is a person and has great powers. And God sees what's happening and says, to Moses, you need to go down and you need to deal with that. And the way it's written in the Bible, the Lord said to Moses, I've seen this people, how stiff-necked they are. And I thought, how wonderful that little phrase is. When you're stiff-necked, have you ever noticed, you can't turn left to right. You can only see what's straight ahead. You only can experience, your life is all about what you can experience or what you have experienced. There's no room for all the potential, the spectrum of potential on all sides. And so when God says to Moses, these are stiff-necked people, he's really saying they're missing the potential of life. They're clinging to what they know. They're clinging to what they think brings them love. They have no idea yet of how powerful they are as spiritual beings. We've all been stiff-necked. We've all thought that our love came from something outside, or we're still hoping that love will come from a person or from our bank account or from having the right house or the right car. And we suffer in that. If you saw our Christmas Eve service, my partner and fiance, Stuart, did a really powerful video about attachment. And he was speaking particularly about his attachment to our house in Denver, which in order for us to move to Grand Lake needed to be sold. And 3 years ago, when we had our first opportunity to move to Grand Lake, we actually backed out of it. And a big reason was that Stuart couldn't imagine us not having that house. So then it became, can we afford a second house in Grand Lake? And decided at that time that we couldn't. But we began to do our work around it. I needed to do my work around the fact of not feeling like I deserved or not feeling like I could really stay with something I desired, that my partner and my partner's happiness in effect trumped mine in some ways. But Stuart began to work on, what is my attachment to this house? And granted, he'd owned the house for 19 years. Lots of things had happened in that house. He had created amazing beauty in that house. And yet, when I got a pretty clear message that I was to be spending more time in Grand Lake, he had to admit that town, that being up in the mountains provided something that he too wanted, to be out in nature more, to get to enjoy the things that he enjoyed up in a place where we lived and didn't have to travel to anymore. And so this year, he was able to see through that idolic worship. And we were both able to say yes and move forward with the purchase of a home. And if you saw the video, the joy that he expressed in the life that he's living now was palpable. You could see it in his face. You could hear it in his voice. That's the potential that we have. And so the opportunity is to not stop loving. In fact, as we make more space in our heart, there's more room to love. But to look at, are you clinging to the things that you love? Do they to you seem to be the source of what love is? And not recognizing that love flows as you. That the things that you love need to be held loosely. Not only so that they can flourish, but so that you flourish. So that you're able to say yes to the unfolding of your life. And so today the opportunity is in your piece of paper to release, just to say, okay, I'm ready to release this tight hold. I'm ready. One of my prayer chaplains sent me a prayer today, and as we move into a time of the burning bowl, I'm going to light the burning bowl in just a minute. And invite you to be writing down the things that you're ready to let go of this year. Maybe you've even started on your letter. You can continue that. But I want you to just take in the words of this prayer. It seems so appropriate to today's service. Divine Spirit within, as I pause now and turn my attention inwards, I allow my thoughts to quiet and gently float away. Reflecting on all the rhythms of my living being, I'm aware that the rhythm of release and renewal is inherent in the divine order of life. Just as a child knows when to wake and play and when to rest and sleep, I listen to that inner knowing that informs me what qualities, habits, beliefs it's time for me to release. That I may allow in new ways of being and expressing the Spirit I am. What a blessing that we are fitted with an inner guide that tells us what ways of being too tight for, let me start that sentence again. What a blessing that we are fitted with an inner guide that tells us what ways of being are too tight for our hearts or don't support our souls, or leave us alone and disconnected whenever we turn within to listen. At this new year, we give thanks for this divine power of release and renewal, always present within. We give thanks that we may recognize this power by the sense of peace and connection, kindness and creativity it brings to us, and so it is. And so, now I will light the burning bowl, and we will have our opportunity to release.